Well, UCF is deep into fall camp. What can we learn over the last couple weeks and things that have caught our eye in an interview with Brandon Helwig? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I am your host, Sean Green. We are presented by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Guys, if you want to bet on UCF this season, FanDuel is the way to do it. Download the app today. You will not be disappointed. The best lines that you can get for UCF. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the spread for the first game is 16.5. UCF is favored. Again, I kind of said that would be the spread around there, and that's territory you don't want to be in, but it is Jack State. But again, FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Guys, I hope everybody is doing good. As you see, I'm in a new location. I'm still in New York. When you're seeing this, I am now back home, recording this a little bit early, have a lot to do in New York before our usual scheduled programming on Fridays. But like I said, Brandon Helwig, UCFsports.com, On3 Rivals, was kind enough to sit down with me and have an interview, and we went into everything that he's seen. I haven't been able to be at practice this past week, so kind of talking to him about what's going on, kind of hearing what he's hearing and meshing it with what I'm hearing. It was a really, really good conversation. I think for you guys especially, this is the time where people just want football, and I think this was the perfect conversation to have, where we're not just talking about random stuff, we're talking about stuff that is happening right now to get you even more excited. So, without further ado, let's get to Brandon Helwig of On3 and Rivals.com. And like I said, we are joined by Brandon Helwig, publisher of UCFsports.com on On3 now and Rivals. Brandon, thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, I'm not at home, so you are saving me by giving me all the details of this week's practice. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Sean. Always enjoy being on your podcast. And yeah, it's football season. You know, we got practice pretty much every day. We've got, NFL preseason started. And before you know it, the UCF season opener will be here in a little bit less than 3 weeks.
I know, it's coming up quick. I always said the offseason is painful, especially for a podcaster, because we have to talk about last season. There was a lot more content to talk about with recruiting and everything. This one was a little bit harder because there's not much recruiting news and stuff like that really excites people. But we're closer to the season. And this week of practice, I think you've gotten, I wish I could be there, but you've gotten 2 opportunities to see the team this week.
Yeah, we had this morning on Wednesday, we had some, when you say opportunities, they're just, it's maybe like 20
I tell
minutes.
People,
and let's not make it more than it is. It's not like we get to see the whole practice, or we get to see the scrimmage and the team portion, which would really illustrate of how the team is looking. That would give you the idea of depth chart and maybe if there's favorites amongst certain positions. But we got to see a little bit. What was interesting today, like obviously, biggest storyline, as we all know, who is going to start at quarterback for UCF? Is it Cam Fancher, Ja'Cory Brown, Taven Jackson, Davi Belfort's the freshman, the newcomer in the mix? That's obviously the question that gets asked at every press conference. We got to see a little bit. What we get to see today, we basically get quarterbacks, throw into receivers, throw into wide receivers on air, they call it, and then, maybe get some 7-on-7 type stuff, or just not 7-on-7, but actually quarterbacks throwing to receivers being defended by defensive backs. So we saw a little bit of that today. What was interesting is Cam Fancher, I'm not sure exactly why he was held out of the passing today. I know UCF has a big scrimmage on Thursday night inside the stadium, weather permitting. If it's bad weather, they'll go in the indoor. But there's a big scrimmage, and that'll probably, from what we understand, that'll go a long way into determining who is going to be QB1. We really don't know when that determination is going to come. As you know, Frost has been asked the question a million different ways since, Big 12 media days. The way he kind of says it, when the team knows, we know it'll kind of, it'll clarify itself. So it'll be interesting which direction they go. Just buzz you kind of hear from, insiders, people who maybe know people within the program. It's tough. Like, we're going to put odds on it. I don't know. But I think a lot of people, just assume that, Taven Jackson might be the favorite just kind of based on, his name, his accolades, his recruiting past, the fact that he was kind of the main portal QB that this staff, went after. But I'm saying don't sleep on the other two. Don't sleep on Cam Fancher. I've heard great things about him this entire year, going back to spring. now. I know he didn't throw today. They're probably just resting his arm maybe for the scrimmage. And Ja'Cory Brown, I know a lot of people saw him last season, and maybe they just kind of, they saw maybe that Iowa State game. He was a great running the ball that game. They remember the passing. They kind of ride him off like
they can't look at the passing stats for that game.
Yeah,
they just
but
need to look at
he's made
rushing.
a lot of improvement working with Coach Frost, Coach Cooper, Coach KZ, and this staff. And I know they're really excited about his potential. He can put it together. He's got he looks. I mean, if you go out to practice, he looks like the starting quarterback just physically. I mean, he's the guy that's built and put together. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of determine this when they announce this. I don't know if this is something they want to. It would be better for the team if they announce it sooner than later. If they go into next week with the QB1 just to get everyone on the same page and get the reps and get the receivers comfortable with whoever's going to start. So I'll be curious to see, what happens. We don't have access, but I'm sure some start will leak out about tomorrow's scrimmage to see, who might have been the front runner in that setting.
And let me run through my thoughts that I've compiled from what Scott Frost has told us. I've personally said that the way he speaks is that because nobody's really gone the extra mile and kind of taken that extra step, that I do think ultimately he's probably viewing the first game as more of a extra practice to finalize. Like, at the end of the day, if there's somebody winning every single different practice, it doesn't really instill confidence that the guy that you're paying a lot of money to and is kind of the favorite, it doesn't instill a lot of confidence to the fans that he's going to be the starter. I've said I do believe that ultimately he will be, that Taven Jackson will be the starter. But when you hear buzz from those other guys, like a Ja'Cory Brown or a Cam Fancher, how much can this staff in this short amount of time really have improved them to get them to beat out Taven Jackson, which, granted, he hasn't had a lot of starts and he hasn't had a lot of playing experience, and a guy like Cam has. But is this enough time for them to really beat a guy like Taven Jackson, who clearly the coaching staff was high on?
That's interesting. And you kind of said it a minute ago that fortunately for you, I mean, we hope these are tune-up games, for UCF. They should be. Jacksonville State, clearly, second week against North Carolina A&T, that definitely is a tune-up. Jacksonville State, it's not. Rich Rod's not coming back with a bunch of returners. They got a new coach, a bunch of new players. So they have some time. Like, I kind of feel like in the back of their mind, maybe if they were going to be completely candid, they kind of know if there's a top two that materialize, they can let them both get playing time. And then by North Carolina, you want to have a guy, you want to be settled by that game. I think that might be what if there isn't clear separation. And I think what Frost said last week, from talking to people around the program, they said, well, he's spot on. Like he's not, holding anything back or kind of being vague. Like there's not much separation. Like you can make an argument every day that maybe this guy did something that, could warrant, consideration to be QB1. So it'll be interesting. The one thing I do know about Scott Frost, which might be different than the previous coaching staff, he doesn't care whether it was his guy that he recruited. He doesn't care if a guy's making more money in NIL. He doesn't care about any of that. He's going to play the player that he thinks is the best, that's going to give UCF the best chance to win. And as we've seen in other quarterback competitions, namely a few years ago when Mikey Keene was coming back and JRP, John Rice Plumlee, was we all knew that was Gus's guy. There was never going to be any scenario that Gus wasn't going to name John Rice Plumlee the starting quarterback. But the buzz that we heard in camp was that Mikey Keene was by a considerable margin, was outplaying John Rice Plumlee in every way in camp. So much so that when Gus came in the team meeting room and announced who the quarterback was going to be, I was told there was like an audible kind of gasp. Like guys, like the players assumed based on how Cam had gone that Mikey Keene was going to be named starting quarterback, and they were getting ready to congratulate him. And they come in and say, oh, no, John Rice Plumlee's our starting quarterback. But anyway, that's kind of irrelevant in a way to what we're talking about. But it's not like that anymore. I'm just saying, like, Gus had his favorites, and they could do no wrong. They were going to play. Frost is the opposite of that. He gives everyone, from what we understand, everyone has a clean slate, and everyone's viewed the same. So just because maybe a guy that they looked at, they thought based on paper and experience, maybe they thought this guy has the best chance. That's why you give him the bigger NIL deal. You think this guy should be the favorite. They're going to do it based on results. So I think that is a comforting thing that's different than the previous coaching staff.
But to your point, Like you mentioned, something like that happens where Gus goes into a room and names the starting quarterback that probably didn't deserve to be the starting quarterback that year. I think the same thing you have to look at this season, right? If Scott Frost went into the room and if a guy like Taven Jackson didn't ultimately earn it and the players all knew that, then you're setting a bad precedent. You're setting that basically whoever makes the most money is going to be your starter. And if he does end up, if the team believes he's the guy and then they announce him, okay. But if Scott Frost goes in and says, this is our guy, and the team knows it and it's not the one making the most money, I think you're setting a foundation for the future. Like you are setting the whoever is the best at every position is going to play. That is very different from the last half, like you said.
And that's exactly how you said it. And it's not just the quarterback scenario that I just kind of spelled out with the previous staff. Like they played favorites. There were guys that, like I said, they could do no wrong. They were going to play regardless. They could mouth off and cuss out coaches on the practice field, and they could be back the next day like nothing happened. And if some other guy did that, they'd be kicked off the team. So there was kind of like the culture kind of issues where that was a little bit more than maybe what was publicly known. That from what we gather when we talk about, what's different and how much the guy, and we've heard it like mainly a lot through spring. We talked to, various players after every practice, and you were there for a lot of those availabilities. You heard how the players talked about Frost, about how refreshing it was to have someone who was straight up that they could talk to, that they felt was fair. And just there was it was kind of a different vibe, I guess. But, I think everyone, for what it sounds like, everyone really has bought into what Frost has been selling.
Well, and that's why I've kind of bought in a little bit, because when I talk to people and I hear how different it truly is, you don't really believe it. You think, okay, ultimately...
Yeah, like everybody says that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but when you hear just how different things are, you do start to kind of believe. Now, granted, you have to prove it on the field, right? Like, great, everything's different behind the scenes. You have to prove it on the field. But it does make you question, okay, like, is this team potentially in a better spot than they were last year? Even though you can safely say that maybe last year's team was more talented, is the togetherness of this team with 70 new players, which is shocking to say, going to be able to win them a couple more games, ultimately. One of the things I want to talk about is receivers, because I think that's the fun topic besides quarterback, because nobody truly knows who's going to be the starting three receivers out there. We were there in spring, and I've been to a couple practices in the fall availability, and you kind of see who, not necessarily the favorites are, but you see the guys that can perform. Now, I always said I don't want them to just throw out the older guys because they're the older guys and they have more receptions in college football than, say, a Carl Jenkins or a Wayne Charles or a true freshman wide receiver. But what are you seeing from that group, and do you potentially think a true freshman wide receiver could start from day one?
Oh, first of all, about wide receivers in general, I always will feel great about UCF wide receivers as long as Sean Beckton is coaching them. I think, and it's not just me being a UCF homer just because everyone knows Sean Beckton's name, Hall of Fame, former player, all that stuff. It has nothing to do with that. His track record at UCF of developing receivers is unmatched. And frankly, when Scott Frost got here, I guess you can't really criticize because the second year they win the Peach Bowl, but I don't understand why he took Sean Beckton off wide receivers, because he brought in Troy Walters to be the figurehead OC / and wide receiver. He was a former Biletnikoff winner, so he had to coach receivers. But I think he should have kept Beckton on receivers. He should have kept Beckton on receivers when he got to Nebraska. Beckton was coaching tight ends at Nebraska. And he can coach tight ends. He can coach DBs, which he did back in the day. They had to move Brandon Marshall and Mike Sim Walker to DB one year. I mean, he did a good job at that. But he's an excellent wide receivers coach. So as long as he's coaching receivers, I know that he will get the most out of the guys he has on the roster. That being said, that's really kind of we're all talking about quarterbacks. Obviously, that drives the most attention, the most, podcast minutes, clicks, message board posts, tweets, whatever. But wide receiver is kind of that low key, like who's gonna, because there's guys that we don't know much about these guys. These guys who were in Division II. Like, we're going to talk about DJ Black. I think he's the favorite to kind of be the face of the receiver corps, to kind of the number one receiver type guy, the guy that can, deep balls, take it off the top, whatever. I think that's the guy that is going to emerge. But, he played at Limestone. Limestone University, they don't even exist anymore. Unfortunately, they got disbanded. The university shut down.
Yeah.
But no one even knows where Limestone is. They're in South Carolina. But anyway, that's the guy they're relying on. Dwayne Thomas, they call him Speedy. Okay. He was at Charlotte. He was okay at Charlotte. He wasn't like their best receiver. Nothing really jumps out at you to say that this guy is going to be a star. But they really like what he could do. They like, the type of he's in the slot. I think you're going to see reverses, different end rounds, him paying the ball off. I think they're going to do a lot of different things with him. That's another name. And Wade and Charles, who I know. You might have some interesting content with him coming up before too long, but that's a guy that, Marcus Burke from Florida. He's a senior. He's been around. He's experienced. Never really put up eye-popping stats in any given season. They expect him to play a big role, but he was injured for most of spring. And when he was out, Waden got an opportunity to kind of move into that top 3 in terms of on the first team. And really impressed, from what I gather. I know when we talked to Sean Beckton right before camp started, he talked about Waden he was the one that was kind of, it's funny to say a true freshman, but he was kind of leading the group, like telling the guys, like, we got to go out, we got to catch balls, we got to do this. He was kind of doing things that you expect a junior or senior to do. So he's a guy that's really focused. And, I think that'll be kind of if you're going to choose some potential breakout stars, guys that freshmen or guys you don't really know, I think Waden has an excellent opportunity to be that guy. But it'll be interesting. Like, we want to talk about, how good can this team be in year one? Is it bowl? Is that a realistic possibility? Quarterbacks, but yeah, quarterbacks got to come together. UCF's got to figure out a consistent QB1. Wide receivers, they've got to materialize. And offensive line, I don't know if we're going to talk about that in a minute. There's a lot of guys who haven't really played a lot, but a lot is going to be expected of them. How are they going to mesh and come together? It seems like to me, though, and you watch everything that Frost says. You've been at press conferences, you've seen him all. He seems confident. He seems very confident in all these offensive positions, and maybe he's like that. It seems like he feels like this team is a lot better than what everyone else on the outside is expecting.
No, 100%. And to your point on Waden, because I do want to get to the Frost being very confident factor, but watching Waden in spring, we were all on the sideline for like the spring practices and all that. It's kid's 18 years old, 17, 18 years old. He's huge. Yeah. I mean, he's massive, and he's making plays. And you can't help but look at it and be like, okay, if this dude doesn't play this year, I'd be shocked if he's not on the field in some capacity, because you just look at it and he's got sheer talent. And that's like no bias. It's just like he passes the eye test when it comes to a big-bodied, bulky, high-point type of wide receiver that you'd want. But again, DJ Black impressed, Dwayne Thomas. I mean, everybody was talking about Dwayne Thomas. So I think the receiver position is going to be something, hopefully, that is very fluid. And then who knows who will be out there for game one.
And Sean Beckton gave an example the other day. He said, well, maybe this isn't the best year to point out. He was talking about 2015, but he was saying like that, we know what happened there, but he was saying no one really knew what to expect. A lot of the receivers from the previous year graduated. A lot of the big names, a lot of the Fiesta Bowl receivers, they came back for 14 and they all graduated. No one knew what to expect. And Traquan Smith came out of the blue. He was the American Athletic Conference Rookie of the Year, had, the best ever receiving year for a freshman. Sean Beckton can develop receivers. So if these guys have been working with him since spring, I mean, that could be Wade and Charles. I mean, we might be talking about him as, he might be breaking freshman records at UCF. Who knows? But I have full faith and trust that Beckton can get it done.
The fact that Sean Beckton is here makes us a lot more confident, or me a lot more confident, especially in the receiver group, regardless of if anybody knows the names in the group. But to your point about Frost's confidence, I think that one thing that has made me more confident is saying that the players see the difference in the change. Do you think that Frost's confidence is more so? I have heard from people, and again, when they're saying everything's changed, it's been because that they've come together. And Frost has been pushing that, listen, we have the talent, but it's if they're going to come together. Do you feel like maybe there is that bit of like, he's saying it because it needs to still happen? Like, there's 70 new players. That is an excuse you can use. But do you feel like he's so confident because he does feel like it is, and he does see it, and he knows they have the talent? So there's a part of him that's like, okay, this team is better than I think everybody's thinking, and we're going to prove it. We still have to clean up some things, but there is that light at the end of the tunnel where this team can be actually somewhat dangerous.
Yeah, I think you've said it. I think he's very confident. I've heard he's it's funny. All the things we say, we kind of hear from different people that maybe around the program, but he said it. He's like said it at Big 12 Media Day. He said he really likes the talent on this team. He said it multiple times that he feels that the transfers, that their hit rate on transfers is very strong, because sometimes you bring guys in. KJ Jefferson last year, that the hit rate was
not
zero.
Good.
Okay, but the hit rate on the guys they brought in that think are going to be quality players and make a big impact, he's very comfortable with that. But yeah, there's a confidence about him. I think we're all going to be talking preseason like, yeah, can UCF get to 6-6? Can they maybe beat North Carolina and get to a bowl game? I think if he was honest, and I don't think he wants to overpromise, underdeliver, but I'm thinking in the back of his mind, I honestly think bowl eligibility, and I'm putting words in his mouth, I really don't know. I sort of think like that's in the back of his mind, that's like the floor. Like, I think he thinks the team can be much better than that.
Well, and I mentioned in his contract how he only gets the additional year if he makes a bowl game this season.
Right.
And I said people weren't reading into it a lot. They're just like, oh, okay, it's only this season. Okay, thank God. And I'm like, no, I think that is something. I think there's a confidence of him that, hey, I feel pretty confident we can get to a bowl game in year one. Like, because then he could have easily pushed for, if I get to 6-6 in the first 2 years, then, but no, it was specifically the first year. So I personally do think that there is a little bit of a edge or a confidence of, I can get this team to a bowl game. I can get this team 2 extra wins than they did last year. And again, it's easier said than done. Everything is against UCF. But to your point, I do think there is a hidden confidence, but a little hidden confidence about really how good the team is, and that nobody really knows.
He was asked, I think, at the pre-camp press conference about whether he has something to prove and that kind of thing. He kind of deflected. He said the right things, but it'll be interesting based on how the season goes, just from a national media standpoint, how they kind of react to the Scott Frost 2.0 here at UCF, because he took it on the chin at Nebraska. The way they seemed to find ways to lose was just, inexplicable. Just the many ways that to lose by one score. And if he can get it going, if he can get it going at UCF, and we're not talking about going undefeated like 2017, but if he can put UCF back on the map within the first couple of years, I think that will, I know he said it's not about him. He doesn't feel like he has something to prove, but I think he does. I mean, who doesn't? Everyone's competitive. He's coaching for a reason. He loves coaching, loves the kids, but he wants to kind of get that glory back on his name. Everyone nationally they're skeptical.
Sure.
I don't know, outside of the UCF fan base, who I think loved Scott when he was here and what he did, and maybe feelings were hurt initially when he left, just because a lot of stuff, UCF fans really hadn't dealt with before, like having a coach leave. Like, that wasn't really something that had happened. Just like when Dylan Gabriel, they hadn't had a high-profile player transfer out. Now we're kind of conditioned to kind of expect, or at least kind of, we'll see it coming when it happens. But I think outside of the UCF fan base, I think a lot of people are skeptical about how this is going to go with Frost. And so to that end, I'll be very curious to see that week. I'll say it here. I don't think this is like breaking news or anything, but the North Carolina game, assuming everything goes reasonably to expectations, I think North Carolina opens with TCU. That's a tougher game for them. I think if everything goes reasonably well for both teams, I think that will be a big noon kickoff.
I agree.
Just like Colorado, they came to town. I think they're going to be coming back to UCF. We'll see. I think there's an excellent chance of that happening. So that's just it'll be interesting, that kind of the buzz about that game. And if UCF can find a way, if they can beat North Carolina, that whole Belichick Frost angle, that'll be quite the remarkable story.
Changes the complexion of your season. Not just in the conference, but to the public. It makes you look at UCF different, which, as we know, nobody's looking at UCF very favorably. And yeah, like you going in and beating Bill Belichick in North Carolina, regardless of how good they might be. Now, granted, they do need to beat TCU, but I think by all accounts that would change the complexion of how you view the season.
And the fan base, the fan base has been very kind of irritable the last couple of years. Although I'll say this, like the UCF fan base just being in the Big 12. I know the whole happy to be there. I know that's not good enough, but I think that should still kind of go a little ways. just the fact that you look down the road, 60 miles, whatever, Tampa, and 90
could be a lot worse.
It could be a lot worse right now.
Could be a lot worse.
The fact that UCF is playing these Big 12 schools is a lot of fun. But I think the fan base needs something like to get excited about, because it seems like, ever since that Baylor game where, look at the score, we're going to win this game. It's so exciting. We win the Big 12 home opener. And then everything just, after that, it just seems like it's been a nosedive. I know that Oklahoma State space game was kind of the one that went the way. But ever since then, I can't really think there hasn't been anything that has been all that great for UCF football fans. No,
last 2 years have been rough. And that's why I think there's nobody wants to have ultimately, we're talking about 6-6 is like, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And
desperable. Yeah.
They're like, hey, you'll take 6-6. And people are like, no, we want 10-2 and college football playoff. Like, unfortunately, and we'll get to it. Who knows? But ultimately, there are steps to this. And this is not unusual in college football. But for this UCF team, if they can make 6-6, you should be you should be celebrating if they can get to 6-6. But before we kind of talk into perception, I guess perception can be used in this question. Alex Grinch. The public perception to Alex Grinch is that he is the worst defensive coordinator that any college football program could hire anywhere on the face of the planet. That's just the public perception, or at least on social media. But everything we've heard over the last couple, or into spring and now into fall, is that the defense is probably better than the offense right now, and not really in a close proximity. Terry Mahajer has come out and said that the defense is really good. Many players have said this is the best defense they've been a part of since being at UCF. What is your kind of sense on the defense? I know the defensive line, a lot of people are pretty confident in. I'm not sure necessarily if the depth is there, especially the secondary. For me, I'm a little nervous about the depth and the quality they have at the secondary position. What does this Alex Grinch defense look like to you right now?
Hey, and you missed one. Frost, even the other day, said, if this defense is as good as I think it is, because they were asking about offensive philosophy, he said, if the defense is as good as he thinks it is, they may just dial it back and slow it. We don't have to go breakneck speed if we feel like our defense is as good. So there's some there's a lot of confidence from Scott Frost. But it's interesting. Alex Grinch is kind of the defensive version in some respects to Scott Frost, because it wasn't that long ago that he was kind of the golden boy coordinator, the guy that was going to be a head coach, was going to get some job offer. His name was on The Athletic or whatever, Pete Thamel, Bruce Feldman. They come out with these hot boards every time there's a coach opening. Names to watch for this job. He was always being mentioned, and then he maybe didn't get jobs. I'm probably interviewed for some, I don't know, but then he continues with Lincoln Riley, go to USC. It just kind of, and it's not working. It's not really working well for Lincoln either. I mean, we put all the blame right now on Alex. Their fans put the blame on Alex Grinch, but it's not really working so hot for Lincoln Riley. No. But I feel like, just like Frost, and I think he's even said this in press conferences, he has something. He's in a similar. He has something to prove. He has a chip on his shoulder. He kind of needs to get that moxie back. Kind of how Frost, in the same way. Everyone looks at that Nebraska tenure. Well, people are looking at Grinch this is an important season for him too. And you're right. We hear a lot of confidence about this defense. We'll say, and I think they've got a little bit more known quantities on their side of the ball. When we just talked about offense, it's kind of hard to look at receivers and say, this guy's really proven at the FBS level. Quarterbacks, certainly not. Offensive line, there's a lot of guys that are going to start that really haven't played a lot. But on defense, it's a little bit different. You look at defensive line, you bring it back, both edges with Malachi Lawrence and Nigel Kelly. Nigel Kelly's an elite talent. John Walker is healthy again. They brought in some other transfers. Sincere Edwards, we were talking about, Wade Charles is a breakout on offense. I think Sincere Edwards is going to be the guy on defense. I know he played some last year as a true freshman at Pitt, but he's a beast. We try to grill the players after practice. This to get them to give us something interesting, give us some detail, who's looking good out there. And we always hear positive things about Sincere Edwards. So that's a name to watch. And then linebacker, they've got some experience there. I think they've kind of settled in on Kelly Lawson. Came from Virginia Tech, and Lewis Carter from Oklahoma. I think that'll be the top two, and they've got experience. And then that back end at corner, Antoine Jackson, another guy, could be a breakout. I don't know if we really knew it last season.
We thought he was done, but obviously we didn't know the injuries.
Issues. Yeah, he had some didn't know lingering the injuries stuff, and he wasn't, didn't play a whole lot. He played some, but he didn't really make an impact that was notable last year, but he wasn't 100%. And now every day they put out social media clips showing one-handed interceptions. I mean, he's looking fantastic, at least from that aspect, but heard a lot of good things about him. Philip Dunham, transfer, safety. He was at FAU in Indiana before that, hearing a lot of things. They call him a ball hawk, so there's a lot more proven quantities on that side of the ball that, if they've got the right coordinator that can put the guys in the right spots. I mean, Grinch on paper, right? You said, fans are saying he's the worst coordinator. I don't know. Just what it's similar to what Frost said and kind of made waves at Big 12 Media Day. Don't take the wrong job. The jobs don't always fit the coach. And maybe that was the case with Grinch and USC. Maybe the change of scenery, maybe being humbled a little bit will help. And hopefully this is the right job for Alex Grinch.
And listen, from everything I've heard, I think the players love him. I think they like the scheme. They like the defense that UCF is running. Obviously, we'll see it in week 1. And I think that will probably change people's perception. I think, ultimately, they believe they have the talent. They seem extremely confident in it, which I don't think there's been this much actual confidence in a UCF defense in a minute. I think there's always been confidence, but you never really know, the way they talk about it.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone was ever totally the recent Gus era. Okay.
Like Ted Roof's defense, they were like,
we'll start with T. Will. T. Will really had never been a D coordinator. I know he sounded cool and kind of gave great press conferences, but we didn't really know what to expect on the field. And then, Addison Williams, really, he was kind of inexperienced. And then Ted Roof is, Ted Roof is Ted Roof. So
he's experienced.
He's experienced. Don't call him old because he did not like references to him coaching a long time.
Yeah.
But I like the makeup of this staff overall that Frost put together, though.
No, I agree. Well, let's kind of close with this. Obviously, I close with this when I talk to some of the players on Meet the Knights. I kind of want to close it with you. Nobody believes in this team. Nobody. If you look on every social media site, practically, if you look on every Big 12 poll, UCF is last. And I said, I get it. I understand why, because you're just nobody's looking deep into UCF press conferences. Nobody's looking at kind of what the offense is going to look like, what the defense will look like. They're kind of just looking at the number, the 70 new players that keeps getting thrown out. And they're looking at Coach Scott Frost, who crashed and burned at Nebraska, and they're looking at Alex Grinch, who's crashed and burned in college football people's eyes, and especially at USC. So from our perspective, I have a different perspective. We talk to the team, we kind of see some things. My perspective is this team, in my opinion, should get to 6-6. We don't know quarterback, we don't know receivers. These are things we don't know. But with the changes made and what we think is this team could easily get to 6-6 with all the changes being made. Do you feel that way? It's easy to say they could. It's easy to say that. But do you feel like the media, the national perspective isn't really giving UCF any shot just because of all these things when really they actually do have a solid chance to make a little bit of noise? Not crazy noise, but a little bit of noise this season.
Yeah, I just feel like the whole concept of preseason projections in general is just such a crapshoot now. I mean, it always was, but with portal, and UCF's an extreme case with 70 new players, but every school, most schools in the nation are dealing with that, where you've got brand new guys and you don't know. I mean, you can say they're talented on paper, and these guys maybe they've produced at their previous schools, but you never know how the guys are gonna mesh together. We were just talking about how together it seems like this team is. And I think that goes a long way. And that could be the difference between 1 win, 2 wins, 3 wins. I mean, you can't really easily quantify that, but I really think that's the case. I'm curious. I know we're talking about UCF, but we look at another school in the Big 12, Texas Tech. They've spent ungodly amounts of money on their roster. I don't know what they're saying, 40 million, 50 million. Lee Hunter, I mean, this is not secret. Lee Hunter, I think, got $1.8 or $1.9 million to leave UCF and go to Texas Tech. And because of whatever the rules are, maybe they're changing, but with house settlement, a lot of that was paid prior to June 30th. So that's already in his bank account. And I don't mean this I don't really want to talk about Lee specifically, but I'm saying this applies to a lot of people. They've been paid a lot of money. Where is the drive coming from? Where is the push in the heat, in the summer, during camp? I mean, they've already gotten paid. They know they got the money. They got the money. And so it's going to be about the teams that, I guess you got to have that pro mindset. Yeah, you're going to get paid, but you want to prove it on the field. Where's the motivation coming from? And that's the thing that this is where I know Frost, he brought in the program, which is this military-based kind of team building, bonding, that UCF put out. I think any UCF fans knows what it is. They put out a video of it, but he did that the first time he was here. But they really do a good job of kind of, helping players get to know each other, getting to know the whys of different things. And hopefully that does go a long way, because I really do feel like that could be the difference of why UCF is going to be a lot better than what, say, national media expects.
I think so. I think the changes that have made, hopefully, for our sake, being to watch the product is much better. But I think with the changes being made, I think that people will be shocked.
I do want to say this. I think we as UCF-centric media, we always get caught up kind of in our own press clippings and the hype.
Absolutely.
I think last year
we really got caught up.
We really, we were making excuses for KJ Jefferson. I remember we talked about this.
We knew
before the season, we knew that there was, in the spring, Gus let us come to more stuff during spring than he ever did. And I'm watching him and he's missing these easy throws. And I'm like, this guy does not look like a good quarterback. And we all kind of fool ourselves that, when the lights
practice.
come on, he's experienced, he's been in the SEC, he can't be this bad. And the New Hampshire game, our media friend Chris Boyle, the Daytona Beach News Journal, just put out a list ranking the top quarterback, ranking every quarterback that ever started a game. All right. And he had Pete DeNovo last. And I talked with him about it. I said, KJ Jefferson should be last. That's the worst quarterback that ever started a game for UCF, just based on the amount of investment they made in him and what we actually saw on the field. I mean, UCF fans, Kingdom donors should have gotten a refund for how bad that was. But I'm just saying, we all kind of build into our own hype and stuff. I certainly hope that it really is accurate this season. I feel that it is, but I think if we would have talked last year, we would have convinced ourselves that KJ Jefferson was better than the buzz, better than what we saw. And I think even two years ago, we tried to sort of say that Gus's recruiting was already recruiting with the best of the Big 12 and his, Anyway, it didn't materialize under Gus, but hopefully we have faith that Scott Frost will right the ship and get things going where it needs to go.
And we were being very careful with how we are saying records or anything like that. They could get to 6-6. I think they can. I am allowed to change my opinion after the first 3 games at that point. I think a lot of the changes made, though, I think are the right changes for what the university needs. And hopefully that materializes into them making the right hire in Scott Frost. But Brandon, I appreciate you taking the time. Like I said, you really saved me. This was fun. I definitely want to talk at some point in the season, have you come on. I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but where can people find you if they
you can find me at UCFsports.com. Been around for a long time. We're part of, like you said at the onset, we're part of the On3 network now. UCF Sports on Twitter, and always happy to talk with Knight fans.
Best coverage out there. Go check him out if you haven't. I'm sure you all have, though. Brandon, thank you so much.
Take care, Sean. Thank you.
Like I said, it was a really good interview. I truly appreciate it if you guys have made it all the way to the end. If you did, please like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. We greatly appreciate it. I want to say thank you for all of the kind words and support on Meet the Knights Episode 1. It truly means a lot to us. We put a lot of time, effort, energy, everything that you can think of into that show. And just to see that you guys appreciate it and are loving it and loving how we did it. And that truly means the world to me. Took a lot of work, like I said. So episode 2 drops on Monday with Braden Marshall and Jalen A.P. Hayward. It's a really good one. We went to Keg Social and, we had a one-on-one arcade match and then an interview as well. So be on the lookout for that. All right, everybody. This has been... also, FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Make sure you guys download it. Like I said, it is the app to use. It is the sportsbook to use this college football season. Download it wherever you can and use it whenever you can when gambling. All right, everybody, that's going to do it. This has been Charge On. We will see you next week.